Welcome to the Unzip Mind podcast. I'm Nick Smith. I'm here with Greg Minikis and Dylan Jessen.
Hello.
Hey guys.
Hey,
Nice
how's
to
it
see
going?
you.
Hey. What are we talking about today? We're going to talk about stigma.
Talking about stigma. Yeah. Not an easy topic. As always, you know, we are a lighthearted bunch, so we may throw in some jokes, but like stigma is a serious thing, and a lot of our patients deal with it. We ourselves have dealt with it in various forms in the past. So like this is a pretty serious topic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's something that I think we want to address it initially right here in the beginning because it's something that unfortunately really dictates how people that we work with on a daily basis, and then just in general, people who have any kind of mental abnormality have to deal with on
People
a
who are,
day-to-day
like,
basis.
Neurodivergent in some
Yeah.
way, or have like a chronic mental illness or something like that. Yeah, and there's a lot of people who fall under that spectrum.
Yeah, and stigmas unfortunately dictate how society interacts with them on a day-to-day basis. And it is something that, you know, if I may, not overly speaking for you, Nick, but it's something that Nick and I in many conversations have shared that we have a very shared experience of dealing with stigmas with our past lives in our addictions, and what people would just in generally, without getting to know us deeper than our extracurricular activities, they would assume of what we were and who we were because they knew we used narcotics.
Yeah.
So this is the time that we will not pull up the Webster's dictionary definition of stigma, but as far as I know, stigma is like a negative perception that's attached to a certain thing. So you can have stigmas around like relationship styles, or stigmas around like certain identity characteristics. But what we're going to be talking about today is mental health stigma around people with mental health disorders, stigma around finding treatment for mental health disorders, and stigma around addiction as well. Those are probably like the three like broad umbrellas. Topics we'll be covering.
Yeah.
So when you guys want to start with just talking about stigma that you've seen in your own lives, or maybe we can talk about like stigma that we've seen that our patients experience? What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, to go off what Dylan said, he brought up kind of some of our history that I feel like we constantly are still experiencing it. But, and I don't talk about, I wish I would talk about more some of my past and my history with drugs. And the reason I don't do it is, if somebody asks about it, I'm very open book, as Dylan knows. And I think we talked about it pretty early when we met. It got brought up as a mutual kind of conversation, but
It did.
if it gets brought up organically or gets brought up at all, I don't have much of a filter with it. But I think I don't put it out there initially as often because of the stigma, and because, like what Dylan said, it changes the perception of who I am, or that I'm, I guess, a risk in a sense, that maybe my behavior is risky, or I'm untrustworthy. Because especially, I did a lot of drugs in a lot of different ways. At my worst, I had needles in my arm 4 or 5 times a day for a good year. And that's pretty heavy for a lot of people to take in, and I understand that.
Especially if they haven't been exposed to that in their lives. Like if they don't know anybody personally who's close to them who's used drugs like that, then it could freak them out. Like they don't they're not used to it. Something that's like alien and scary.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah. My favorite is like you don't look like a drug addict.
Yeah.
Oh, what's and that's my thing is like I always ask people like what is your percent, like what do you think a drug addict should look like?
What does a drug addict look like? Does
You
it
know what
look
I mean?
like some Wall Street banker who is slamming coke in the the bathrooms at Goldman Sachs like every day, or like going to parties every night and slamming coke? Like is that what a drug addict looks like? That person's wearing like a $5,000 suit.
Yeah. My favorite one is, I would never use needles. I would never. And what's funny about me is 18 years old, I still hadn't drank any alcohol, hadn't even smoked cigarettes, nothing. And then by 19, I had used pretty much every drug, and I was slamming. Wow. I was, putting needles in my arms at that point. So it happened very quickly, and it wasn't as much of like a conscious decision. It was a series of life events, and of course some decisions, yes, but it happened very quickly, and that's the reality of how it really can happen to anybody.
Yeah, it really can, and it happens, it happens so quickly. It's unfortunately for me, it happened very young. I would say like my addictions really started, probably like 13, 14. Right. And I know that's older than some, younger than most.
Younger than most.
But it was also where I grew up. I grew up in the sticks of New England and up in New Hampshire, like up in the mountains. And, growing up there, during the whole opiates, like the opiate epidemic, if that's what you want to call it. But growing up there, dude, it was easier to find a bag of pills than a bag of weed, right? Like it was also like more acceptable to have a bag of pills on you than a bag of weed.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And, it was also a way that people were meeting ends where grandma or grandpa, has a huge prescription of oxycodone or Perks or Vicodin, and they're only going to use a percentage of it.
Yeah.
But they just got that on their healthcare, so they just paid $5 for that script. Right. So they're going to give it to their nephew or their grandson or whatnot to go sell the rest of the pills, make a couple $100,
bring some money home.
You know what I mean? And that's like this. That's what I grew up in, and really. So like I was dabbling for a little while and like playing with a bunch of different drugs and kind of like going to school and like, dude, by the time I was in probably a sophomore in high school, there was not a day I was sober in school, whether it was smoking weed, doing pills, or there's times I can't even make it. We had Bud Light in our water bottles on a regular basis and we just get hammered while we're in class. Wow. And then after my head injury, is when it got real bad. That's like, I was on some pretty heavy painkillers and my doctors just stopped it dead, like no weaning, anything. It was just boop, done. And I just remember looking at my brother right after and asking him to roll me a blunt because I was in so much pain. And from that day on, it was just, I was just constantly trying to be high on something. And then it just became a habit. And by the time I was in Colorado, it got pretty bad. And
it's definitely a drug culture out there too.
Yeah. And it goes hand in hand with like the music scene and it goes hand in hand with the ski, like not the ski scene. I don't want to put it just in that, like in that context, but like where I lived was a party kind of place. And like, I lived up in Summit County too. Right. And being 21 and being up in a party area, it's just hand in hand. And that's, I remember, Nick, I don't know if you ever did this when you were in your grips, right? In your grips of your addictions. But I would always make excuses, right? Especially like when I was 21. Okay. So like I moved out to Colorado when I was 20. When I was 21, I was like, oh no, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It's fine. I'm 21. I'm supposed to be partying. I'm supposed to be having fun. This is fine. And then, I'm 22, but I live in Colorado. I'm a ski instructor. I'm supposed to be partying. It's
absolutely
fine. Right. It wasn't until I think I woke up in my own piss like several times with me barely making it to bed. And I was literally, I was so tired of apologizing for shit I couldn't remember doing. But you just wake up with this like shitty feeling that you did something wrong. So you're apologizing for stuff you don't remember. So you're not really apologizing for it.
Yeah.
And you're doing this habitually. And it just makes you feel worse and worse about yourself. But then you just go get higher and higher and higher.
Yep.
Then you forget.
Yeah. Oh, you do it to forget.
Yeah.
Like I remember the first time I was smoking opioids. Like I was smoking pure opium for a little while. And then also I ended up getting into heroin accidentally. And luckily I did not go down that road too far. Because I knew. Like the first time I got high on that, it was like I looked at my friend and went, "This is dangerous. This is too good."
Wow.
Like I understand why people get addicted to it. That saying where it's like a blanket or it's a warm hug that I never received. It's very true.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
once you feel that, it's probably hard to get away from. Get out of that warm comfort.
Well, when you're from for me personally, when you come from trauma, when you come from a lot of pain, and when you come from a lot of unknowing and uncertainty, I would say that's like I had some you know, I wasn't like I lived the hardest life as a child. Like I had support and there was love in my household. There was also discord and some other stuff. I don't want to put my family in blast by any means. They're not here to defend themselves or anything, but like, you know, it wasn't all rainbows. Let's just put it that way. Right. And then I had a lot of personal doubt and a lot of personal shit that I had to deal with. And, you know, for our viewers and you guys know this because obviously we know each other on a personal level. Mm-hmm. I battle ADHD. I have really bad ADHD, mm-hmm. right? Or I shouldn't say really bad. Anyway, I'm ADD. Bad. Yeah.
It's definitely clinical. And like,
you
treat it clinically.
So I've always been, I would say I've always been drawn to things that stimulate me, right? And I've always dealt with a lot of issues because of my ADHD, which being ostracized in groups, being, you know, being marginalized but even by teachers who didn't understand it and didn't understand how to like work with me and being, and like, it's why I hated the public school system, right? Like they didn't know how to, I couldn't be in that box. Yeah. I couldn't adapt to, I couldn't adapt. They couldn't adapt to tolerate what I needed. And I couldn't function within their boxes, right? So I found a way to do that, and that was by numbing myself.
Yeah.
So that started really early on. And then dealing with the stigmas later on. Like when you're high all the time, you don't deal with this. I don't know, Nick, if you had to deal with this. I never dealt with stigmas because I wasn't aware of it because I'm so numb and I'm high. I don't give a fuck. It wasn't until after, and when I was like doing better for myself, that I was like, oh shit, this is how people view me. Mm-hmm. And I was actually working on my psych degree when I dealt with the heavier parts of it. I just, I remember being in a car going up to the ski hill and I was getting a ride with a friend. I didn't know the other person very well that was in the passenger seat. I was in the back seat. I just knew that he was a classmate and I had him in a couple of my psych classes. I don't remember the conversation, how we got to here, but I remember how it felt like out of the blue to me. It was probably within the context of our conversation, but this dude just blankly goes, yeah, all addicts are pieces of shit. Wow. I hate like he just was putting addicts on blast.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do. I felt so uncomfortable and I just shut down in the back seat because I was like, well, okay, put myself through school, trying to do better. And I'm 2 years sober. Like, this is cool. Now I know how he views me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know.
That's a very regressive view. That's, you know, when I hear something like that, it feels similar to when I hear someone say something that's like racist or like otherwise bigoted. It's like, this is someone with just like a very backwards, outdated view. They're not informed about the subject. They don't realize that like once you're in the grips of addiction, it functions exactly like a disease. Like it is really hard. You need like treatment. You need like, a lot of times you need some kind of supplementary medication. Like if you're on opioids, you need like in order to detox safely and with like minimal symptoms, you need like a Subutex or Suboxone, some kind of like, I forgot what you call it, like an opioid replacement. It's a serious thing. And especially like, we talked about during our intro episode, all the like psychosocial factors, like social isolation is a huge factor for addiction. Mm-hmm. So like not taking that into account and just a blanket statement, like all addicts are pieces of shit. They're all just making choices. They got to pull themselves up by their bootstraps, blah, blah. I think that is very regressive. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to deal with that when you hear something that's like that shockingly bigoted. You're like, obviously you want to call it out, but if it's something that's like related to you, if you're like, it's hard to defend it's easier to defend other people sometimes than it is to defend yourself. Because you're like, I don't want to be all self-righteous and like put this person on blast because like they're saying something that offends one of my identity characteristics. So like I could see that being a very awkward car ride for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. Nick, what did you come across, like, were you aware of stigmas when you were in your addictions, and like were you more aware, I guess, like how we were just talking about, were you more aware when you were sobering up and like how that make like that feeling?
Definitely sobering up, but I definitely had a moment. That's what pushed me to even get clean. Like I was in this world. I was in a very dark world, by far the youngest in this world, and like my drugs of choice at the time were like uppers, right? Like before I got to needles, like I was doing a lot of ecstasy and Molly and cocaine, and I ended up in jail for a good month and a half, and when I was 19, and met the wrong people in jail, and both kind of got out at the same time. At this point, I kind of lost everything. I lost my car, I lost my relationship, to my best friend at the time. And so my life just kind of imploded. And then I had tried methamphetamine and then was slamming. And then I'd never felt addiction until that moment. And once in, I was just hooked. And a lot of that was from my personal life, that it was an upper right. So it brought me out of my shell and out of myself. Like mine was kind of a social issue. I spent a lot of time on my own. I grew up, my dad died when I was a teenager, but growing up in his home was a very hoarder, very, very disgusting situation. So I spent a lot of time alone in that kind of situation. So I think the uppers kind of brought my personality out a little bit. But to answer your question, I was in a very dark community and very gang affiliated. And I think about now, sober, in those moments or even out in public, like it's kind of had blinders on, right? Like never had any thoughts of what public is seeing me as, or how I'm presenting, any of that. And then when I got clean, and now I look back and it's just unbelievable. You know, I can't even begin to describe what I would think the public saw me as, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's what really caught me by surprise, is the ability, like the fact that after I was sober, and since, you know, creating new connections and doing new things and being in a new environment, you hear things that you wouldn't have heard in your other, you know, in your past group, because those are the same people. So why would they be chastising you or putting these labels or these conditions on you? But when I was in the other group and when I was sober and I was more aware of things, yeah, it wasn't until then that I was like, this is how you guys see people? Like you're just assuming that these people made these choices, right, and that this is totally okay with them. You're not actually trying to even understand the situation or trying to understand where this person's coming from or why they would be doing what they're doing. You're just going to go ahead and blankly say like, oh, that person is doing that because they want to.
Right.
And they're pieces of shit and they're never going to amount to anything.
I mean, there's a big incentive to do that kind of cop out. Like once you just put a blanket statement on, like, let's say we were talking about this in the intro, like all homeless people, you're saying that like, oh, these are just bums. These are bums who are making shitty choices. They're just drug addicts. They need to pull themselves up. Once you say that, like you can also say, like, if you work in mental health, you can say the same about your patients. Like, oh, these people, they're just so entitled. They're just behavioral. This is just behavioral. They're just attention seeking. Once you write somebody off like that, that gives you license to not really try that hard anymore. Now I don't need to put myself out there and extend that empathy and go the extra mile to work hard for them and, you know, make some sacrifices so I can help them get their needs met, because they're just making choices anyway. Like I don't need to try that hard. So it is adaptive for people to do that, because it like frees you from responsibility and from having to care.
And it's so hard to get people out of that mindset that don't have that experience. That's so hard to do, to communicate it and explain it in a way where somebody would understand with compassion, you know, whether it is mental health or substance abuse. I find that difficult a lot.
Well, we've had to do, you know, over the years that especially you, like even over the 4 almost 5 years that I've been working at the facility where we work, we've seen a culture change away from this sort of stigmatizing view, like, because, you know, especially back east, where at the hospital where I worked, the word behavioral got thrown around all the time. Yeah. Like, oh, don't worry about that person. They're just behavioral. Like they're just attention seeking. Yeah. Like that is a term that we definitely hear. It's big all around. You go to any kind of facility, a lot of different mental health settings, like that word gets thrown around, because obviously there are some people who they may have some manipulative behaviors that it's probably been adaptive for them in their lives to be a little, you know, to play a little bit of a game so they can gain some social status or gain some advantage over somebody else. And so you do get those people occasionally, but like that is not the norm. And a lot of the times when people are yelling or they're like asking a million questions or they're like trying to get some attention, like this is someone who's been marginalized in many cases their whole lives, or they're dealing with tons of unresolved trauma. So they may have these like maladaptive behaviors, but to label that as like, oh, they're just behavior. Like this isn't their mental illness. This is just a behavior. Like that is a very unfeeling, so it's a way of writing off that person completely. And that's something that we've had to like work work with as a culture change. I feel like we've come a long way.
Yeah,
At the
absolutely.
facility where we work.
I really appreciate you bringing that up that way, Greg, because I fucking hate that.
Yeah, I hate that.
I cannot stand when people do that because it's a cop out and it's a way of creating that distance and that space. So it's no longer something that we can fix. It's like, oh no, what does it mean? When I hate, that's the other reason when it's behavioral. We're all behavioral. We all have behaviors.
I do understand what it means. What it originally referred to before it just became this big thing that a lot of people say just to write off their patients is there are people who they exhibit kind of erratic or aggressive behavior because their mental illness is out of control and they're just like, they don't really know what they're doing. So they just start doing these behaviors that are really maladaptive and hurting others or whatever. And they don't really know what they're doing versus someone who is making a choice to behave a certain way because they're trying to get some advantage or to get like maybe some extra medications on board from their psychiatrist or, that they don't necessarily need because they're medication seeking as a coping skill.
Yeah.
So like these are not direct results of their mental illness. They're like either learned behaviors or choices the person's making to try to play some kind of social game. But at bottom of that, in many cases, is still unresolved trauma. Mental illness is probably at play. The fact that if they're acting a certain way, like maybe pretending to have more anxiety than they're actually having so they can get like an extra dose of a benzo added on by their doctor.
Which is probably how they met that need before.
That's how they've been meeting that need, especially if they've been, homeless and like in the drug scene in Portland, homeless, like that is how you get your relaxation. That's how you quell the anxiety anyway. So it's like, it's very compassionless to just throw that label on people.
Well, and that's what I'm saying is like, and obviously, I know what behavioral means, but like, that's what I'm saying is, what you just did right there, you just defined actual behaviors, and you defined what was the motivations behind a behavior. When people say, "Oh, they're behavioral," okay,
yeah,
cool. So I'm behavioral because I'm doing something.
I am also behavioral,
right?
Yeah.
We're all behavioral.
Yeah.
What it is when you've said the word now a couple times, and like I just want to highlight it: maladaptive.
Yeah.
They're all things, and that's like addicts, right? Okay, I didn't start doing drugs behaviorally. I wasn't behaviorally ingesting a shitload of acid. That wasn't. No, I was adapting to traumas and different things. I didn't like my reality at the time. And guess what creates new realities? Lots of acid.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
It's really fun too. It makes you feel good. So, and like what Nick was saying too, like I followed a very similar track. I really like uppers, right? Yes, I would smoke opioids. Yes, I would take downers every once in a while when I needed to be numb, right? I also fucked my body up in a lot of different ways with a lot of different sports. So painkillers were helpful that way. But my main things that were uppers, and I was, what's referred to as candy flipping. And that's what I did regularly. So like I would be tripping and I'd also take like Molly or acid or another upper, or Molly or cocaine or another upper along with the acid, right? So you're kind of flip flopping between these two things. And that for me though was a way that I would release my tension. I would be outside of the fact that I was living less than paycheck to paycheck. I was trying to figure life out, that I was, you know what I mean? And like, and also I was just having a great time. Like, to be honest, like in my mind, I was having a great time, not realizing the absolute damage I was doing, not realizing that, my own mom did not feel comfortable coming to see me for 5+ years in Colorado because she knew, and my heart goes out to her because she knew what I was doing. And I never hid it either. And she knew what I was doing when I lived in New Hampshire too. But she did not feel comfortable coming out and seeing me. And I can't be pissed at that. I wouldn't, if I had a son doing that, I would not be able to bear witness to that. Are you kidding me? It would break my heart.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that people, with along with stigmas and along with putting everybody in a box and giving them these little titles, they're not thinking about the damage it does. Right. And like the fact that this person probably has a family. This person probably has people along who they've hurt along the way, or that are hurting for them,
Or-
because they know what this person's going through,
Or they have no one,
or they have no one,
which is just as bad, if not worse.
yeah. Almost worse,
Probably,
right?
yeah, it probably is worse.
But that's one thing that you know, when you were talking about all that stuff, Greg, that I think is really important is within stigmas. I think a lot of stigmas and a lot of things that we deal with and we see within the world of mental health are ways for people to distance themselves, and a ways for people to not really look at the actual causes, and that way they can justify their ignorance or justify their lack of fucking care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and it is easier to not care. Like,
Oh, it's so easy.
I have felt it. I don't think I've ever like been working and have just stopped caring completely and just like stopped caring about anybody. But I've definitely felt the temptation to like the person starts yelling for like the 20th time that day, and I just like, part of me is like, I just want to go out there and just tell them to shut up. I just want them to shut up. I don't want to deal with this. And that's like a very kind of selfish, that's like a base version of myself that I don't want to be, because it's not effective to tell someone to shut up. Even if it does shut them up in the moment, that's just perpetuating the cycle of abuse. The compassionate thing to do, and usually the more effective thing to do in the long run, is to go out there and just keep building that relationship. Like, you may have to, you may be trying to tell them to be quiet, but you're not going to sacrifice the relationship. Like, it takes more effort, but it is, I think, a better and more sustainable way.
You know, those are actually a lot of times some of my favorite patients, because I love learning, right? Especially when it comes to mental health, both about myself, about other people. And those are some of my favorite patients, the most difficult patients, the ones that it seems nobody can develop rapport with, the ones that are the most, whether it's aggressively yelling or what have you, the most difficult ones. And then over time, when you are able to develop a little rapport where they open up, whether it's about their history of their life or their situation right now, and then you are able to see that core and see where that behavior is coming from, those are some of my favorite patients, you know, because those are the patients where I have those feelings and I have those emotions where I'm just like, this is just so frustrating or so difficult, or you feel like shutting off. You don't, but you feel like shutting off. But working through that. And then once you see past the barrier and you see to the kind of the core of where that's coming from, then you're like, oh, okay. And then it just I start to attribute that to everybody. And then all those behaviors is like, what's their core? What is that trauma? What is that pain? Or what is that stress in their life right now?
Becomes like an opportunity for growth for you, and like you develop like some insight from those patients. Yeah, that's fair.
And I think,
can't say they're my favorite, but I do appreciate growing. My favorite are people who are like nice and well behaved, and we can have fun conversations.
Favorite in the aspect of learning more.
Yeah.
Or challenges.
No, and I've also grown a lot from those patients.
I have to agree with Nick though. I really do, Greg, on this one, because it's a challenge. It's like a little puzzle. It's like, ooh,
exactly.
Ooh, you tricky. Let's try to figure your little puzzle out.
Yeah.
How can we figure out a way to actually help you to grow and maybe to get over some of your mental health issues that you're having, and also just keep your behavior under control so that you don't like ruin the day for the rest of the
and
patients.
gain that little bit of trust.
Yeah. Well, and that's something else that is really important too. And I think we're very fortunate. And people who work in mental health, right, work with the mentally ill, and we are a fortunate bunch who see those challenges. We see the people who are put into the boxes of stigmas, because that's really what it is. It's very, it's not a label. Like, I'm not labeling you with your stigmas. Your stigmas are like what I'm holding on, what I'm assuming, but that's still putting people in a box. And then I feel like it really falls, and obviously, if y'all want to correct me, that's fine. Like, I would love to hear other people's opinions about this, but like my personal perspective with it is, when we build these stigmas up on people, we then have the issue of confirmation bias, where only things I'm going to start seeing are those that confirm my stigmas. Right. So if I automatically think all homeless people are dangerous, I'm only going to notice the dangerous homeless people.
Right.
Right.
That's a good point.
And I'm going to assume all their behaviors are with ill intent. And that's one thing in, you know, coming from the world I came from, where I was, you know, I wasn't, I actually, you know, I did become homeless for a little while. But I wasn't living on the streets per se. Right. And luckily, because of the community I lived in, I had some very dear friends who really helped me and picked me up and let me stay on their couches when I needed it. And
That's lucky.
yeah, I was very, very fortunate. There was a couple nights where I'd have to stay in our ski school locker room because I knew the heat was on and there's couches, right?
Not to interrupt you,
Yeah.
continue, but on my app, I had that. I had
Yeah.
people offering, but my pride got it. I stayed in my car for a couple months.
That's
because-
exactly where it was. My pride, because there was a couple times, like if it was say like working really late and we didn't get out of the kitchen until super, super late and I was really tired or something, I would go stay on my buddy's couch. That was right up by the ski resort. Or my really good friend, his name's Austin. He's one of my best homies, and him and I lived together for a little while as well. But I remember when everything was going down, I called him up and I literally was like, yo, shit hit the fan, dude. I need your help. I'm moving out. Like, I need to be out of this house now. And he came and showed up, and I remember we pounded back like 3 shots and we just packed my shit up, and he held onto my shit because I didn't have a car either at that time. He held onto my shit for half of my shit because I had another really good friend. She held on to the other half of my shit for over 2 weeks. I would stay on his couch every once in a while, but same, like my pride, I couldn't just hang out at his house. So every once in a while, without telling people, I would take either the last bus up or I would walk up the mountain to the ski school locker room because it was locked for sure. But like if you had the passcode, which I worked there, so I did, you could open it. And I knew nobody was going to be in there at certain hours. And so I would sleep. I would always set my alarm before ski patrol showed up because we shared the same locker room with them. And so I would get up and go to the coffee shop real quick and then walk in like I had just, you know, so nobody could know. So people probably knew, but in my head I was making so nobody knew really where I was at. And it's a pride thing. And I was still drinking and using because I was fucking miserable.
Yeah. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget this night. I remember staying in my car. I used to stay in my car commonly in the Costco parking lot in the back. But I'll never forget Thanksgiving night when I slept in my car and it was so cold. And in the back I had a Halloween costume that I got for Halloween. It was a Sasquatch suit. And I'll never forget using that Sasquatch suit as warm, like trying to stay warm in my car. And I'll just never forget that moment and just that aloneness on the one day or one night that you're supposed to be with family and loved and together, you know, and
wrapped in a costume that's supposed to be like another fun thing. That
wrapped
you do
in my
with
back
other
seat
people.
of my 2-seater car, you know, with no heat and trying to stay warm.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like a lot of people just like to assume, and they don't know that side that you know, these people that we choose to stigmatize have typically never lived super great lives, and they are battling things that are very, very difficult. Yeah. And it's really hard to it's really hard to be empathetic and put yourself in those shoes. It's a lot easier to be like, oh, they're just pieces of shit.
Yeah,
and then write it off.
And then write it off and then not have to take any action. Like if you say that they're all pieces of shit, why should you spend time like volunteering? Like why should you donate any
I don't need help.
money or any of your time? Like I don't need help, so why should I help them?
Yeah, my energy is going to be useless. Right, because that's kind of the idea of it. Is like, if they don't want to help themselves, what am I going to do?
Right.
No, they probably do want to help themselves. They just don't know how. That's the thing.
Don't know how, or they just like they don't have the resources. Like when you're stuck at 0, it's like really hard to claw your way up to 1. Like once you got 1, once you got like a little bit of something, then maybe you got a room, so you have an address for when you're filling out job applications or something. But if you got nothing, it's really hard to get something.
And think about even the patients or people that want help.
Yeah.
You know, they know that they're faced with those stigmas and that fear of even in a hospital setting that they're going to be treated as those stigmas.
Yeah. I mean, so on twofold there too, like, you know, Greg, you just brought up the homeless thing is from 0, super hard. Yeah. Cause in our country, you need an address to apply. Yeah. So if you don't have an address to apply, you can't apply for something. Right. You don't have an address. If you don't have a phone number, if you don't have a phone because you're homeless and you need a phone to talk to your doctor, or you need a phone to remember dates, or you need to call somewhere, You can't do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you don't have health insurance, how are you going to
Yeah.
get
Payphones aren't
life-saving health care?
and payphones aren't easily accessible anymore.
Right.
And then the other thing too, like what you were just talking about, Nick, with that is also I'm sorry, when you were just talking about the addictions and people who have to
Like coming in for treatment or
yeah,
attempting to acquire treatment.
yeah. With that is the stigmas of addiction in itself and having to get out of it. I remember when I first started my path of becoming clean for a very long time, when I'd have to go to the hospital, so obviously I'm coming out of my addictions and my body is doing its thing. And, I still, in the sports that I do and stuff, I tend to sometimes hit trees and or fall on rocks and it hurts. And then I have to go to the doctor. And I don't like to tell people. And for a long time, I never told anybody because I was so afraid of how a doctor would view me if I said I'm a recovering addict.
Yep.
And I was so afraid of that getting put into my records because I was like, well, if I tell one doctor, how am I going to be addressed at any other hospital I go to? They're just going to assume that I'm in here med seeking.
They see like history of drug use,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Oh, okay, this person's just here for a dose."
History of narcotics.
Yeah.
So they're going to see it. But now, once I got more comfortable in my skin, and I went, you know what, this is me, this is my path, and this is what's happening. Now I do. I inform, when I go in for any treatments, if like say I hurt myself or whatnot, I do let them know, like, hey, I'm a recovering addict. Please do not put any narcotic. Like I make it very clear that I do not want any narcotic. I don't care how much pain I'm in. I never want to be stuck with a narcotic again in my life.
Yeah.
Now it's like a Tylenol on steroids. I get like a shot of Tylenol, and it's direct. It's a direct. Anybody in the medical field, if you can tell me what that is, that would be lovely. But it's a direct shot, and it's exactly where the pain is. So it's not this overarching pain medication. It's right where it is. It's going to last for a little while, and then I'm going to be uncomfortable. And okay, but me being uncomfortable means something's healing, and I'm thankful for that because I used to live in a world where I felt I was either very happy or I wasn't.
Yeah.
It was one or the other. I was either really pissed or I was really happy. And there wasn't any other thing. I didn't want to be uncomfortable. So anytime I was uncomfortable, I made sure I wasn't really quickly. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, I mean, what you said about like at a certain point you just decided that this is just who I am. I'm just gonna be comfortable in my own skin with this. That's a really hard step for people to take, especially like, the stigma comes in other forms too. Like someone decides that they want to stop drinking. Like it is really hard if you were in a social environment where everybody's drinking all the time, going to bars, if you're big on the bar scene, and then you realize that's unsustainable and that you need to stop drinking, like it is hard to do that. So much of your social life is centered around drinking, getting all red in the face and laughing and giggling and everything. Like that is a fun, like for people who use it moderately, it's a fun time to like be drinking at the bar with your buddies. And so to lose that is so hard. And like, how do I find fun things to do with my friends? Can I even have these same friends anymore? And like, I don't think it's very part of like the lack of mental health awareness in our culture, I think, is we don't have enough people who are willing to just at the drop of a hat, just change their behaviors to support their friends. Like, you know what, buddy, like, let's not go to the bar. Let's go to a coffee shop. Let's go to a jazz club or like, let's go to a place where we're not going to be drinking. Like I will hold back myself from having a little bit of pleasure tonight by not having a drink because I want to be with my buddy because I want to support you. Like that needs to be more institutionalized in the culture.
I feel like it's so rare. Like I had to restart my whole life. I don't know about you, Dylan. I'm sure you had some of those experiences, but that's so rare that someone adapts and can limit their own kind of use, whether it's drinking or what, to accommodate, I guess.
It's and I love that you brought up alcohol too, Greg, because it's super socially acceptable, right? 100%. Yeah, it's a drug, it's a poison. It's quite literally your liver will fail. But it's very socially acceptable nowadays. So I've been sober. March 16th will be 9 years.
You haven't drunk for
9 years.
Alcohol. Wow, that's amazing.
And I relapsed on pills a little while ago. So I do have 2 birthdays, right? So like I've never had another sip of alcohol. Like the day I quit drinking alcohol, I got halfway through a Budweiser. I went, this is my fucking problem right here.
Yeah.
And I put $5 on it and I walked out of the bar, and I never have had
What a
another
moment.
beer. Yeah. And like, I will say, I think that's part of like my makeup and my ADD is once I make a decision, I'm done.
Yeah, I'm similar in that.
Boop, done. But with narcotics, I didn't have a problem in my mind. Like due to the point where like I never once went to I can't say that because my first AA meeting, I was stoned because I was so fucking nervous. Like I smoked weed before my boy showed up and brought me in. Then I was like, oh, this was wrong. This was a wrong decision. So I made a point that I was always of sober mind when I went to meetings after that. But I would quite literally walk out of an AA meeting and do the 4 blocks to the bar where my homies were at, and I'd go below lines of cocaine because I didn't have a problem with coke.
Right.
And I was at an AA meeting, not an A, right? So I'm not at
Big
there,
difference, right?
Big, huge difference. I was there for my alcohol, right? And it wasn't, and I was very blessed where I found a really good sponsor, and he just held a mirror up, and that's all. And I openly told him that I used acid and cocaine and other things on a regular basis. He went, oh, well, do you think, nope, I don't have a problem. Okay. Oh, okay. And nope, he wouldn't push anything until the day where like a bunch of things happened in my life all at one time. I was dealing with really bad mouth issues, with teeth and all this other shit. And I also, missed an opportunity for a promotion, and, it was just a lot going on at one time. And I had to go to the hospital, and they gave me it was on the weekend. So because of what was going on, they gave me like a take home, like mini script, right? To get me through the weekend to get to the pharmacy. And it was oxycodone. And the first pill I took, did it appropriately. Didn't crush it, didn't do anything. I just took it. And then right after that, I would wait till my roommate was and it was my homie Austin that I brought up earlier. I would wait till he was either at work and not at the house, or he went upstairs to go to bed. He knew my back life, but I was so embarrassed and so disgusted with myself that I would wait, and I knew what I was doing. And then right when he wasn't there, I would crush that pill up and blow it up, right up my nose. And back in my old habits. And it wasn't until about it took about 3 days of me doing that. And then I blew a fat line. I sat back to play video games. I looked at my coffee table, and like all my glass was on it from, smoking weed. And the rolled up dollar bill was right next to the razor blade with all my powder residue and everything. I went, I have a fucking problem. And I remember I called my sponsor right there, and I went, I'm an addict.
That's a blessing to have that moment.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I went, yeah, I'm an addict. And he goes, okay. You want to call me when you're sober? I will always remember this conversation.
Yeah, it even gave me chills on that.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I do. And the next day I went to his house, and I think I cried for like 2 hours straight.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's huge. And you guys are right. Like, it's super rare to find that group of friends who will support those decisions being made. And, I got a shout out, and hopefully they will listen to this episode too, because I got a shout out. Like, I had one of my homies, his name's Mark Knight. He's an absolute blessing. So when I first started not drinking, again, because of the stigmas, because of the stipulations, because I grew up where I was when I got sober, the way we put it is I was in a drinking town with a skiing problem, right? So there's 3 bars. All 3 of them I would go to almost every night. At one point in time, I was 86 from all 3 of those bars. Wow. Right? Because I would just get blackout fucking drunk, dude, and then I wouldn't remember what I would say. And I just remember when I would pack my bike up at night after I worked, and instead of going to the bars, I would pack my bike up and I would bike out trails, and then I would sleep in a hammock and take photos all night long and like do like long night exposures. And so like my camera and the woods were my thing. Wow. And it wasn't and that happened for a couple weeks until my buddy Mark Knight was like, dude, we miss you. Like we want you to come hang out with us. And I straight up, I was like, I can't. Like, I need to not be. He goes, no, you can, you just can't have alcohol. Just come out with us. Come out with us tonight. And he started surprising me because the very first time I went out, I was like, all right. And I was like super uncomfortable in the bar. Super uncomfortable. And he went and got a round of shots, and he came back and goes, all right, shots for everybody. I'm in the group. I was like, wasn't expecting anything because I got my soda water and my pineapple juice. That was like my OG go-to. Yeah. And he would bring me shots of Red Bull so I could still do shots with everybody. And he was just always there. And then, you know, him and I would go hiking together. Like when I really started making moves to be sober, he goes, cool. And it was like my second real summer in Crested Butte. And he's like, I'm going to show you everywhere that I love to go. And he would just bring me on new hikes, and we would go places and we would do things, and he wouldn't drink around me.
That's a good friend.
Right. And yeah, exactly. Yeah. He was so supportive of the moves I was making. You know, yeah, we would take acid together. But again, this was a point in time where I wasn't trying to be sober from that. And when I did make that move, he was still supportive of me. When I was like, this is also a problem. He was super supportive of me. And I was very fortunate to have that support where I lived. But there's people like Nick, you were just saying, that don't.
Yeah.
People get forgotten. Yeah. Oh, you're not going to be fun anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
And then you get dropped.
Yep. I mean, I only had the people in that world that would have pulled me right back.
Yeah.
And they didn't support your sobriety. Did you ever talk to them
No, and
about
I think it's easier. They're lifers. You know what I mean? They're lifers in the world of in and out of jail and theft and gang affiliations. They're, you know, because like I said, I was very young in that kind of group or community. Yeah. They've all been doing it 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. But it's a different animal with alcohol. And that's, again, why I don't talk about it as much to people that don't really know me, because, like, that's why I say I'm clean. I'm not sober. Yes, I drink alcohol. I've never really had a major issue with alcohol. But I've talked about my substance abuse before and said that I was clean, and then people are really confused because, you know, I'll be in some kind of social event or whatever, and I'll have a beer, and they think I'm on a slippery slope downhill, and it's very different for me. So that's why you'll hear the difference with Dylan, you know, saying he's sober and myself saying I'm clean. But with alcohol, it's like Dylan was saying, it's much different because it's so socially acceptable. So it's also difficult for a lot of people to wrap their head around the issue that someone has with alcohol, especially to their knowledge. All of a sudden they want to be sober, or they're attempting to be sober, and they just want to wrap them into quote unquote the fun again. Rather than when it's, you know, a lot harder drugs, they want to just pull you back into their world so that they don't feel alone. So it's a little bit of a difference, I feel.
When I was going through, it's called like One Up, I believe. I think it's like a One Up thing, and it's a program that communities can go into and train. It's a known program, and you can train, and it's a wraparound program for youth. And one thing that, you know, it always kind of stuck with me is this one thing that you're teaching youth about is what you were just talking about, that pull down thing.
Yeah.
And the way they relate it for youth is crabs in a pot. Because when you're boiling crabs, you'll have one crab almost making it to the top. They're almost out. And crabs will actually pull that crab back down in the pot. Yeah. And that's like drug addicts. And the thing with alcohol that I love that you just brought up, Nick, is what people don't understand. And I don't know if this is necessarily a stigma or just something that is part of it. But what people don't understand is, one, your homie who's battling alcohol and alcoholism, and you're like, and I love how you said the perceived all of a sudden, that person who you don't see that person outside the bar.
Yeah.
Right. So it might be fun in that moment, but what you don't realize is when that fun ends, they probably go home and they're probably still drinking. And then they wake up and drink some more. And then their only thought throughout the day is, when can I go get a beer or when can I go get another drink? And it's not fun.
Yeah, that's not fun.
It's not a fun thing. Yeah. And I remember when because I used to have fun when drinking, right? Yeah. It was a good time, especially in high school. It was great. The fact that I drank as much as I did in high school, I didn't notice it as a problem because, like, again, very socially acceptable. Yeah. I lived in the boonies. It's just something you do, right? You have bonfires and you get drunk with your friends. Very quickly, though, like, especially when I was on my own and doing my own thing, like, dude, you black out all the time, and that's not fun. Yeah, that's not a good time.
That's not fun anymore.
And the fact that, yeah, they just want to bring you back into the fun. Oh, well, you don't have a problem. You just drink a little too much. And I remember having a discussion with a really good friend of mine that when I was pretty early on, they were like, "Oh, but you'll be able to drink again, right? Like you'll be able to have a beer again."
They want that reassurance from you.
No, I can't.
Yeah.
No, but once you get a handle on it, you'll be able to have a drink again. No, because one, I will never have a handle on it. Like I have a handle on it because I don't do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's the handle.
Yeah. Because like what people don't understand, and it's very similar with drugs. It's with these addictions, right? And because addiction is a mental illness, right? It is. And with addictions, whether it be food, whether it be shopping, whether it be work is a big one. It's a discussion my fiance have. But with all these addictions, it's not the end of the end product. That's our downfall. It's the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. So like for me personally, like drinking, it's not the last beer that got me blackout drunk. It's the very first beer, the very first sip. That's the one that got me drunk. Right. That's a very like pretty known saying in the world of alcohol, of AA is like, you know, it's not the last beer that got me. It's the first beer that gets me drunk, right? Because once I crack that beer, it's not like I'll have a sip and let me just stop.
Yeah.
It's num num. Oh, that beer's gone. I need another one, like right now.
What's the other one? One is too many and 1,000 is never enough.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, and it's interesting now because the world is changing, right? Like the norms are changing, and that's one thing we were talking about earlier on too, is that society and culture is kind of in this changing world, especially with the new generation and the woke stuff going on, and people are more accepting. And like when I first stopped drinking, right, and this was only again almost 9 years ago, you had O'Doul's, you had Kloss, whatever it's called, and you may have had one other non-alcoholic beer.
Yeah.
But you didn't have all these non-alcoholics. You didn't have, especially where I lived, you didn't have all these mocktails and all this other shit. When I went to bars with my friends, when I was more comfortable and able to go in and not use substances or anything, I'm not getting, like, my go-to drink, because it was the only option, was pineapple juice and soda water. One, it's delicious.
That does sound pretty good.
Yeah, it's hydrating.
Yeah,
Two, it's also a fruity-looking beverage.
Like a
it looks like a cocktail, so people wouldn't bother me because...
Yeah.
Nick, I don't know if you dealt with this when you were getting sober. It's not acceptable. When I was in bars, people, why?
To
why
just
are
be
you
there
here?
with a glass of obvious water.
Yeah.
That's just
Like I remember in Vegas, we were in Vegas one time, and I literally had a bartender ask me why I was there. And I was like, because my best friend is turning 23 and I want to be here with him.
Yeah.
So fuck you very much. Thank you.
It's like, why are you here? You should be socially isolated right now.
Pour me my slushy like I asked you, please. And don't judge me. And I dealt with that. And now, I don't mean to say this in a negative or in a judgy way. And I know it's probably going to come off this way. People don't get it. Nowadays, it's cool to not drink, and it's more socially acceptable to not drink. So now there's and I do like it because I do drink non-alcoholic beers now. But now there's all these options. Now there's a lot of different non-alcoholic beers, and they're not O'Doul's. They're like good ones. Like good micro companies are coming out with good microbrews.
Even like alcohol-free liquor that has like other like stimulating
I was just about to bring
properties
that
that
up.
are like herbal distillates or whatever.
Yeah, they're made out of a teas and stuff.
Yeah.
That was not a thing
when
when we got sober. That was non-existent.
That's progress.
Now, dude, I can go buy a non-alcoholic, a distilled is what it's like called, rum and Coke in a can.
Yeah.
I can get that for a boat if I wanted to go out, right? You know, whatever. That wasn't a thing when I got sober. So now it's like more socially acceptable. And so now I feel like the stigmas of not drinking are kind of coming down.
Yeah, I think so.
But with addictions, because I don't think people are seeing like that as an addiction per se, I guess. I don't know. That might be an oversimplification and over judgment. But the stigma of addictions are still, because I even deal with it from time to time with patients and with other things where it's not necessarily, it's people that they're close to that you struggle with the most. They are assuming. And one thing that always definitely stuck with me too with my sponsor and talking with them is it's not always, it's really hard to, because sometimes our families and the people closest to those who are becoming sober and who are trying to fix that stuff hold the people who have been becoming sober to the stigmas that they're assuming. So they still hold you in this box that you're an alcoholic or you're a drug addict. So you get stuck in this and they don't ever let you evolve. And I feel like some people fail because of that.
Yeah.
You're right?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was my soapbox. Sorry.
I think in general in the culture there is more awareness that alcoholism is an addiction, just like addiction to other drugs. Alcohol is a drug. Like that's not something, that's not something that I really understood when I was a kid, when I was younger. Like when I first got introduced to the idea of drugs and alcohol, they were kind of separate. But then, I think most people that you would talk to on the street would acknowledge alcohol is a drug. Alcoholism is an addiction. So there's been progress there. I think there has been some progress in understanding that like addiction is a disease and that like you shouldn't people who are in the throes of addiction should be treated with compassion. There is still, there has been some progress made, but yeah, all you got to do is talk to 10 people in the Portland area about the homeless problem. And at least a few of them are going to have clearly like stigmatizing statements about homeless drug addicts and, they're deadbeats, they're bums, whatever. So like there's definitely still a lot more progress to be made. And with mental health stigma as well, like, if you were to ask those same people who stigmatize people, homeless houseless people in Portland who are using drugs, they, probably would have a little more compassion for the person who's obviously just like talking to themselves, yelling into the void. Like they'll probably have a little more compassion for that. But just sort of on the micro level, I think there's a lot of room for progress in just like how people treat people who are neurodivergent, who don't like maybe behave the same way, like who have like tics, who have a tic, like people, I don't know what it's like to be a kid growing up now. It's probably better than it used to be. But like when I was a kid, if you had a tic or something, like if you had some kind of weird vocal, if you had a lisp, a speech impediment, like you would get made fun of. And it's like really damaging to be made fun of for something that's not your fault. Like I don't have a history of addiction like you guys in the same way, but my addiction, my downfall was always just like isolating and just drowning myself in like weed and video games. Like just days and days of just like eating all kinds of crap snacks and just like just playing like hours, like 12 hours a day of video games. Before COVID, actually, it was like I wasn't even playing with anyone. I would just like be playing like Elder Scrolls games or like fucking Grand Theft Auto or Ninja Gaiden or something, just like by myself.
I imagine purposely pushing people away, kind of, or
like
purposely isolating.
Like never making plans with people, like just telling people I was busy or whatever, and just like drowning myself in this bright screen, just blasting me in the eyes, just totally ruining my sleep. And then, when I would start doing that, like it would be really hard for me to socialize. Like I would have a problem. Like my main thing was like I would just feel really uncomfortable just like making eye contact with people and talking with people. So I would get this kind of like shifty, just like blinking a lot or like looking away a lot. Like I just didn't have like good strong eye contact. So people would think that I was like sketchy or untrustworthy. Even people like cashiers, people who I'd meet. So like, even like within the last few, like I'm doing better now. Like I had my own, I had like in March, as you guys know, I had to get like a surgery. And so I quit where I was working and, quit the facility where we work. And, so I just like spent some time in recovering from the surgery. And then I just like really went downhill just in my mental health. Like I just wasn't doing anything. Like I felt like my body was infirm. I was having like spinal pain and like depression, like a lot of depression and just like, just couldn't like, I would go to the grocery store and I would just feel like there was this fog over my eyes that I like couldn't meet the other person's eyes. And that's been like, it was an exact, like I had been doing so much better than I had been previously that it was like very stark to me that like me who had like, I've been like killing it on the job and like, meeting you and like meeting Dylan, meeting like tons of nice people and been very like socially successful and been like dating and stuff that I hadn't really been doing in my early and mid 20s, like having an actual life, like going up like fun parties and stuff. Like, suddenly like I'm back to like, felt like I was back in high school. Like I can't, I can't function anymore. And like, I just felt like a lot of the times I'd be like at a cash register, like at the grocery store or like, talking to, like maybe a new coworker, back when I, before my surgery, when I was, my mental health was still really bad. Like I feel like people just wouldn't give me the time of day because they would see that my eye contact was like a little atypical. And so they'd be like, oh, this guy's not trustworthy. Like I'm going to, based on these very small cues, I'm going to judge this person just based on their eye contact. Even it doesn't indicate anything about my trustworthiness or my character. I'm just like kind of fucked up right now, and it's not really my fault because like
Yep.
I'm having I was having medical issues, and so like that's a small aspect of stigma. We're just being like a little bit neurodivergent. Like I don't know if I'm on the
So like,
yeah, sorry.
Greg, no, don't say sorry. You got nothing to be sorry about.
Yeah, yeah. Please.
I just want to ask you a question. Do you feel like that pressure and what you were seeing would push you further down the rabbit hole
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I can't tell you how many
and
times.
further away from people?
I can't tell you how many times I come out of a fucking grocery store. Fortunately, not recently, not in the last few months, but like all my life, all my adult life. I'll come out of a grocery store or I'd come away from an interaction with a coworker, fist clenched. I'd wait until nobody could see my face. And I would just bare my fucking teeth and just rage at myself. Just like, why can't I be fucking normal? And like, I just want to have a nice conversation with
Especially when you make those small attempts and then
yeah, like,
feel like you're getting.
Yeah, exactly. Like even worse when like I'm at Trader Joe's where all the cashiers are trying to make small talk. Like I'd go to Trader Joe's and I'd buy my thing and I'd be like, hey, how's it going? I'd be a little awkward and I'd be like, try, man. I'm trying to look at you in the eyes. I'm trying to have a normal conversation. And then the person would notice that I was like a little shiftier, maybe my beard was untrimmed or like I looked a little pale or pudgy. And I don't know what it was, but then they would just like shut down and just be like, yeah, like barely make eye contact, like barely look at me. And I wouldn't take it as like an insult, like, oh, this person's being rude. I'd be like, oh, I am so shitty and like unable to function like a normal social animal that these people like won't even give me the time of day. And then that would push me deeper into isolate. I'd be like, okay, well, like now I don't want to leave my apartment.
Just fuel any insecurities. Or,
Fuel all the insecurities and fuel all my maladaptive coping skills, which is just, I'm just going to isolate and because I don't want to have to look at anybody. I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to be seen. So then I wouldn't even go on walks. I would just like not leave, like, especially, you know, this spring, like when I was like post recovery from the surgery, like, man, I would go days and days without leaving the house. Like just
So it'd
never
make
seeing
you-
fresh air.
It'd make you sink more into yourself.
100% sink into myself, sink into my bad habits. Cause like, I just don't want to be out where anyone can see me. I just felt so ashamed of my existence and my inability to make eye contact and function in a normal social way that like, yeah, I would just totally isolate because to hide from that.
Well, I think that's like a really important thing that you brought up, and like something to definitely highlight is the only outcome from stigmas is hurtful.
Yeah.
The only outcome from having stigmas and stigmatizing people is you're hurting you're hurting yourself and you're hurting them.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? You're assuming things off of very little like what you just said, you're assuming things off of very little information.
Yeah.
Whether it be direct information from what you're getting from that individual right in front of you, or some like what you were saying even earlier too, like some archaic bullshit that is just carrying on with you because you were force fed this shit when you were a kid.
Right.
So you're just gonna hold on to it.
You get
And
told. Sorry.
No, you're fine, and you're just not gonna learn or be flexible, right? Like, and that is the most damaging. I think that's one thing that I learned really like kind of early on in life, and I'm very fortunate that I was taught from my dad this, like, to be malleable, to have a malleable mind, to continue to learn and grow.
like that.
Right? Yeah, to continue, because if we get rigid, with that rigidity becomes those stigmas too, where you just
that's a really good way to
things.
put it. I like that.
And then if someone doesn't fit into your like very rigid idea of what like a normal person or like a person worth engaging with should be, that automatically excludes a ton of people. Like, so one thing that I would notice, like I was, so, you know, when my mental health, so pretty much my whole 20s, my mental health was in the shitter. And so like, I became very used to people just like, I would start talking and then they would try to like avoid my eyes and like stop like trying to engage with me. And so I became used to that. And so I would just be very discouraged and I would like avoid talking to people. But occasionally I'd be talking to someone, especially someone who works in mental health, who has like kind of a good head on their shoulders and like isn't a very like stigmatizing person. And I would start talking and I'd like, you know, kind of look away, making my point, and then I would look back at them and they'd still be looking at me. And I'm like, oh wow, this person still wants to listen to me. I'm still holding their interest. And I remember like the occasion that would happen would make me feel really good. Yeah. And I've noticed many of our patients, I mean, a lot of our patients have acute psychosis, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. And so like, they're used to the same thing. Like they're talking, they're talking crazy or whatever. They're used to people not wanting to look at them, not wanting to listen to them. And there have been times on the unit where someone starts talking to me, maybe what they're saying doesn't make a whole lot of sense. but I'm still like, I'm there and I'm listening. I'm like, I want to be there for them. So like, they'll start talking to me. They'll like look off in a space, and then they come back, and I'm still looking at them, and I almost see like a little bit of a smile when they notice that I'm still there, a little bit of a brightness in their eyes, because it's the same thing that they're mirroring what I've experienced, which is they are surprised and pleased that someone is still. They haven't chased them away. Someone is still listening to them, still there for them as a human, still keeping that connection. And like, those are really therapeutic moments. And when I have that connection with a patient, I usually keep it for the entire time, because they know that like I see them and I'm there for them.
Yeah. You're engaged. You care.
Yeah.
And they feel that.
I feel that, they feel it, and it's like just based on very small cues. Like, they're used to people just not wanting to listen to them because they're weird, and then when I am listening to them, that little bit of acknowledgement I think goes a long way. And like, everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to have a connection with people. So I think it's important to check ourselves and not just like write people off based on these tiny cues. Because a lot of the times it doesn't mean anything. Like, I'm a nice person. I don't do unethical shit. Like, just because my eye contact is a little faulty or a little erratic doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. Like, it's good to look past those superficial things and just try to judge people by the content of their character.
I really like how you explain that, and I really like how that attributes a lot of your compassion and understanding a lot to our community at work, because it's very different experiences, like with Dylan, myself, and you, but very similar on why we are so compassionate and because we've experienced a lot of what they're experiencing, or still experiencing a lot of what they're experiencing.
We've lived on that side of the fence.
Yeah.
We've been the subjects to people's misconceptions. And
stigmas push people to the margins, and like
they do.
You guys have lived on the margins of society in a way that's like, I don't know, maybe more impactful or more. Like, my life has been pretty easy. I'm from like a 2-parent home in the suburb, like the Jersey suburbs. Like, in general, I've had a pretty easy life. I've never really been hungry or like had to sleep outside or anything, but I have been marginalized in other ways. Like, I've been miserably unable to have a normal human conversation for years. Just like, so it's like, having been on the margins, I find it easy for me to relate to people who are also on the margins in that same way. I do have an easier time relating to people with mental illness than people with addiction, just because I haven't lived their experience. But I still humans are humans, and like when you've been on the margins, whatever margin that was, like, I think there is a little bit of there can be an instant connection.
Well, no matter what the exterior shows, it doesn't dictate what the interior is. You know, it's just like the cases of all the folks that, have everything, right? Whether they're millionaire, or we can talk about famous people who've taken their own life. They
Robin Williams.
In a sense, Robin Williams, great example. In a sense, have everything, but that doesn't dictate what's going on internally, what's going on in their mind.
Yeah, that's like that's one thing too. Like, talking about stigmas and what people's thought or conceptions are, right? I guarantee you, right? Like, if we all just kind of close our eyes real quick, if all the listeners just close their eyes and you say addict, I guarantee, I bet money on it, and comfortably too, bet money that the first image that comes to people's mind is somebody who's dirty, unkept, possibly potentially homeless, but unkept, dirty, probably either is using intravenous needles or just your drug what's depicted on
sitting
on
against
movies.
a cement wall,
Yes. Right. When in fact, addicts can be what you just talked about, Nick. Millionaires can be addicts.
Heath Ledger OD'd.
Yep, Heath Ledger OD'd. Heath Ledger was also an amazing actor. Let's all be real. Talented human being. Yeah. Amazing human being. But everyone. And that's what's, I guess, the dark beauty. And I know this is a cynical thought, but I think that's the dark beauty of addictions it goes across all socioeconomic scales. It goes across all racial boundaries. And that's not just addiction. And I know we've been talking about addiction just because, like, personally and Nick and I share this, but like, that's something that has been a big part, and like, we've lived in that world. Yeah. But mental illness in general does not care your socioeconomic status, does not care your level of education. It doesn't give a shit what race you are. Yeah. It affects everybody. And just because you may have more money to be able to hide it and or go to better treatment facilities where you can pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars to have a private doctor and a walkout pool and whatever may have you, you're still an addict, right? And you know, they're just,
Now we get in our facility, we get all kinds. We get doctors, lawyers, just people with a lot of money and status. Like it doesn't matter who you are. Like everybody can get mental illness. Anybody can become an addict.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too is stigmas affect a whole lot, and the fact that like Greg, I really appreciate you sharing like that bit about you and what you've had to deal with and how you feel like with you in your daily interactions. And I can really empathize with a lot of that because growing up a kid in the 90s with ADHD, dude, it sucked, right? Because like nowadays, I'm again not in school anymore, thankfully. But high school sucked ass, and it probably still sucks ass for people who are neurodivergent. But I hope that they've gotten a little more elegant about testing people. When they started testing me in third grade, I think it was about third grade, there was no like pull him aside and be respectful about it. And no, they would stop that class.
Step in front of the class.
Yeah, they would make sure everybody knew Dylan was getting pulled out. And I would go up. The one office that I had to go up to was near the front of the fucking school by the principal's office. And they'd make me go put puzzles together, which were dumb as fuck. Like, let's be real. Like, the tests were stupid. Like, I had to put these, like, you guys remember the puzzles that had, like, the pegs on them? That, like, it's clear where the thing goes?
Like circle, triangle puzzles?
Like, it was a dinosaur. And and it has a cutout shape, and you just put it in the shape.
I had to do too many of those, but
so people, okay, it doesn't. Let's just be real. Can we all agree though? It doesn't take much intelligence to know. Yeah. So that shit was boring, and then it shocked them that I didn't want to do it. Because I didn't see the fucking point.
What's the point? Fuck you.
So, but I had to deal with that, and like I had to deal with the fact that the teachers were pulling me out and making this like big deal about it. And it wasn't like a 1 or a 2 offline thing. It was like a while that this went on. And then on top of that, I had to deal with the fact that I felt different from everybody. And because I was a little more hyper and a little more bouncy as a kid, I was chastised, dude. And like I was bullied a lot because of it. I was definitely like kind of ousted because of what I had to deal with. And then it was always assumed that, oh, Dylan's going to be this hyper dude. Oh, Dylan's going to... And it was just assumed how I would react to things to the point where, like, if I was having a chill day and I didn't want to talk a whole lot because I was being more inside myself and I was dealing with my own shit, or I just was calm. Oh, are you okay? What's wrong with you? Nothing's wrong with me. I'm chilling. What's wrong with you? Like,
that goes back to like what you're saying about your dad encourages like the malleable mind. It's like, it's good to be flexible, and it's good to react to people in a flexible way. Like sometimes somebody's gonna be really bubbly, and you're like, oh yeah, let's be bubbly together. If someone who's usually bubbly doesn't feel like being bubbly, sometimes the worst thing in the world is to be like, oh, you seem different today. Why are you different today? Like if they wanted to talk about it, they probably would. And like, if it's someone who you know well, you can be like, hey, you okay? Like you seem down. But also like, just meet people where they're at, man. Like sometimes people are quiet. Sometimes people are bubbly. Not everybody can make eye contact the same. Some people have like shifting eye contact. And like you just got to meet people where they're at, and it doesn't mean that like they need to be called out or need to be like that they need you to tell them that they seem different from you. Like just meet people where they're at, man. I think that's a good way to like reduce stigma. Is like whatever someone is, like whatever their like gender identity or their eye contact style or their like personality, their energy level. Just like meet people where they're at. Like we don't need these arbitrary expectations to like have a functioning society.
I think that's why the way you explained it with your experiences of really good, and same as like something we make at work. We make our patients feel included, I guess, and human. And they're dealing with a lot of stuff, or they have physical behaviors or even verbal behaviors that are much different than you would classify as the norm. But we don't make them feel that way, and that's what makes people open to treatment. Even is just to break down their own kind of walls and barriers like that. So make them feel included and human makes them more open to treatment. It's just like patients that are on holds, which we'll get into another episode. That's a whole episode for sure. They're by not their choice, not as open to treatment. Rather, it's just like substance abuse, someone going to rehab or something that are being forced by family. 99.9% of the time, it's not going to work because they're not open to it.
Right.
You make them feel human and make them feel just involved in our just little
our little like social group right now. Like you're all invited. Like when I'm working on the unit, like if we're having a fun conversation about like art or life or something, like you're all invited, and like they know that, and it does seem to. I see a lot of people who like they've just been so lonely, or like their only social contacts have just been like the people who they use with just very unhealthy, like toxic families or toxic relationships, friendships. And then like we're having a fun conversation that's just like nobody's using. We're all laughing, we're all being positive and supportive. Like nobody's saying anything that's like bigoted or mean. And like you just see the relief on people's faces, like, oh, this is nice. And people who've I've seen also a lot of people who haven't been sober for a long time. Now they're sober, they're totally detoxed, their discharge maybe is coming up in a few days or whatever, so they're totally clean, and they're full of life, and sometimes they say like, I haven't felt this good in years.
They feel those emotions.
They're finally feeling their emotions. They're in a supportive environment like that. Like, and if we are treating those people who have like mental illness or addiction as different from us and not just like welcoming them into the fold, like that's really damaging. And that's like part of the stigma that like because you have this chronic mental illness, or because your eye contact is weird, or because you've used drugs, you are fundamentally different from me. Like that is really damaging. That's a part of what we need to break down. And I know we probably got to get going soon, but like, just meeting people where they're at, and just not having a malleable mind, like Dylan, your dad said, like that's so important. Just like be flexible, meet people where they're at. Like it doesn't take much. Sometimes it takes some work, but most of the time, just requires throwing out some of your expectations and just like being a person with the other person.
Yeah, and that's what we're doing, is trying to break it down. And Dylan, do you have a wrap-up message for us? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Do you have a bass-heavy, bearded closing argument for us?
Let me hit you with that bass. Let me just hit you with that bass. Well, no, I just like I just really enjoyed listening to that. But one thing that I think was really nice that you just brought up, Greg, in passing, is like that when you do have these labels, right, and that's going to be a whole nother episode. Like we were actually just talking about that earlier today. When we were setting up, is the people are just throwing out these disorders. But anyway, when you do have a diagnosis, right, of I personally have a diagnosis of ADHD, right, and some other shit. But when you have a diagnosis of ADHD, or you have a diagnosis of schizophrenia, which is a really hard diagnosis to walk around with, but when you have a diagnosis of bipolar or whatnot, people, because of their biases, because of their stigmas, they assume how you're going to act. They assume your behaviors, and they put you in a box, and they want you to act a certain way. But I love what you were just saying. They're people. We're all people. First of all, whether you're neurodivergent, which is newer, and I think that's a great word.
Yeah, I'd like it too.
It's definitely something that I've been learning to say more often, because it is more it's more of a newer concept, saying neurodivergent than mentally ill or whatnot. But when you meet people who are neurodivergent, and when people who are technically quote unquote normal, which who the fuck knows what normal is, first of all. That is not a correct statement. Because at this point, like I had a psych professor, sidebar, I'm a sidebar person, by the way, but sidebar, I had a professor who said some shit that I loved, and to this day, I'll always remember it. She is a badass professor. She retired my senior year, but I was luckily able to have her all 4 years. But she even was like, if you're not depressed, or you don't have some form of anxiety in this day and age, with everything that's been going on. And this was before COVID, right? So this was like, still we had the wars going on, and we had Syria, and there was all this other bullshit going on. If you don't have some kind of anxiety or some kind of depression, you have some pink ass glasses on your head. Like you are wearing some rose colored lenses and seeing life through some, either that, or you have you have a gold platinum spoon in your mouth.
Especially in the age of social media, like it's really hard to get.
And you are able to rise above all level of bullshit. But I love that she said that. But where I was going with that, and I'm really sorry about that sidebar, but with what you're saying, where it's like some people expect normalcy, I think expecting the opposite side of it. Don't expect normalcy. Just don't expect shit. Just meet somebody, like we were saying, meet somebody where they're at. Just meet people. Don't come in with assumptions. Just meet people.
Yeah.
Like I challenge people. Here's a little challenge for listeners. Meet a stranger, right? Meet and something personally that I carry around with me in life, and like one of my own personal beliefs is that there are no strangers, right? In the sense that if I met you, you're not a stranger anymore,
now we're not a stranger.
right?
Yeah.
I strongly believe that the people we meet in our lives, we were meant to meet, right? The conversations we have in our lives. Like, I don't believe that our paths are set per se, but I do believe that
They branch you off in small ways.
you got it. And the people, whether it's for you or for them, or both, the conversation in the meeting may not be for you. It may be for them. That person might have needed that connection, that conversation more than you did.
Right.
And that I carry that belief with me everywhere, and it allows me to meet people on personally, the way I feel, it allows me to greet and meet people in a different light. And you're not going into these conversations going, oh, that's a drug addict.
Yeah.
No, dude, just chat with people, like,
Yeah.
but like the people you meet in this life, it may not be for you. It may be for them. And if you just meet people where they're at with no assumptions and no expectations, you don't know who you're going to meet. You can meet the coolest people and have the most interesting conversations.
I've had so many amazing conversations at the hospital that are like, I would never have met this person otherwise. And like,
Totally.
now I'm with them for 12 hours or for like 36 hours over the course of a week. And like, I'm getting to know someone who I never would have gotten to know, completely different experience. And sometimes those conversations are like the deepest of my life.
Yeah.
And like, you gotta be willing to get into it with someone and to really like talk things out, meet them where they're at, and like it could change your life, could change your whole outlook if you're willing
That's
to do
what I'm
it.
gonna say. It really opens your world. Like I really like that, and I like that as a challenge to whoever's listening, because the more you practice that, and the more that you do that and practice just that openness, and it does change, because I have the same experience, with so many patients over the years at the hospital that tends to bleed into my life now. And those are some of my favorite interactions with people, even just those 1-2 minute at 7-Eleven or the grocery store, those just positive interactions. Or I know Dylan and I have talked about some employees that we've had, like we've got into our life within, 5 minutes, whether it's our substance use, however it gets brought up, with a cashier at a random store. And those are honestly some of my favorite moments of the day to experience.
Yeah, some of those moments stand out for a lifetime.
Yeah,
like some
they
of those
really
conversations I remember, from my whole life.
They really do, and I know we've talked about it, and it will come up in episodes coming forward, some of the conversation stuff. And I know I've shared with you, Greg, and with you, Nick, that there's conversations I've had with people who are homeless that I will remember for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And they were 15-20 minute interactions. And they were just that impactful. And, that being said, like, dude, I met you, and I think you and I became pretty tight pretty quickly. And it's because very early on, you and I shared those aspects of ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's just being that open, being that raw and that open, it's risky. It is. Like, I won't lie about that. And it's uncomfortable sometimes. You don't know how people are going to accept you or react. But I think it is way better putting it out on the table and letting people then make their judgments or because we judge people. Like, that's human nature. We judge.
It's human behavior.
But giving people giving people the time to actually give you the correct information to make your judgments off of. Yeah, you're not going to like everybody. That's just life. But if you do it without stigmas and you do it without expectations, then it's a more honest relationship. Like, I don't like everybody. That's okay. But if I meet you and have a conversation and I get to know you first, then it's a fair judgment. Yeah. If I don't meet you or judge you and I'm just like, oh, you're a piece of shit. I don't know that. But if I talk to you for like 15 minutes and all that comes out of your mouth is some racial bigot shit, cool, we're not going to be friends.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like, everyone is a product of their environment. So like, how are you going to, how do you have the knowledge and the expertise to judge someone as like being a totally worthless or like a bum or just beyond compassion or beyond saving? Like, you don't know that, man. Everyone's dealt with different shit that you have no idea.
The Unzip Mind Challenge.
Ooh. The Unzip Mind Challenge for the week.
Get out there, talk to some people, unzip their mind.
Yeah, make some friends.
Yeah, make some friends, talk to some people.
Make some new relationships. social dynamics, challenge yourself.
Learn
you.
about yourself through the process.
Yeah. That person behind you who may look a little upset, go ahead, ask them what's up.
Yeah. You okay?
Yeah.
Say, hey.
Yeah.
Actually talk to a register, like a person at a cashier, chat with them, And sometimes you have when you're authentic, you have the most authentic conversations and the most real moments. We were literally just talking about that.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's huge.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for joining on this topic. And just a reminder out there that all of our social media, all of our information, everything is at unzipmind.com. You can reach out to us on there. Please comment on anything, send us a message, tell us what you think. There'll be resources, a little bit of everything on there. So
yeah,
get at us on there.
Yeah. Give us a holler, give us some comments, suggestions. And thank you guys, and thanks for listening and watching.
Cool. Thanks, guys.